Hey guys, tonight we sail into the mouth of the Yangtze River, where British gunboats cluster like angry wasps at Wusong sandbars, steel hulls, gleaming under an overcast sky. You probably won't survive this gritty river diplomacy without your jaw dropping at the sight of steam-powered hulks pushing aside centuries-old boats, but that's half the thrill. So before you lean back in your armchair, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step aboard HMS Borderer's deck at dawn. The steam engines hiss, mingling with creaking timbers, and the river's low, sullen roll. Ahead, 2 paddle-wheel gunboats and 3 iron-hulled launches form a line of battle against Qing River defenses, stone forts, and teak stockades peeking through morning mist. Mainstream fact: by 1857, the Royal Navy had deployed over 20 shallow draft gunboats designed for riverine operations, a technical innovation that allowed Western powers to project force upriver far beyond coastal forts. Historians still argue whether this riverine superiority or diplomatic skill most decisively opened China's trade doors. But tonight you're about to see both in action. The white-painted hulls sport black gunports, each guarding a 32-pounder carronade whose iron shot could punch through earthen embankments. You run your hand along the bulwarks, feeling the rivet joints that bind iron plates thicker than a man's torso. A quirky tidbit drifts through naval gossip. One gunboat's engineer swore he kept a live goldfish in the boiler's steam condensate tank to gauge water purity. Apparently, if the fish flickered fins, it meant the pump was running accurately. Whether fishy or factual, it's a reminder that improvisation reigned on these pioneering vessels. You climb into the pilot's chair beside Lieutenant Harris, whose saber scabbard clanks with each footstep. He points upriver. There, Wusong Fort's embrasures frame our path. Mud brick walls rise 20 feet high, their cannon muzzles dark as a skull's eye sockets. Smoke from hot-shot ovens curls above the ramparts, warning that defenders have their own explosive tricks. You swallow, recalling that earlier in the war, the Qing fired heated iron balls, hotshot, that could set wooden decks ablaze. Tonight, armor and iron will test that old stratagem. A choir of European and Indian sailors belts out a ragged sea shanty adapted for the river Ohir's sands. And currents, we must prevail, the dragon's mouth to scale. Their voices bounce off palm-fringed banks as longshore junks drift past, Chinese sailors scrambling to haul in fishing nets before the cannon smoke blots out sunrise. You wave to them, knowing few will welcome this gunboat diplomacy except skeptical local merchants hoping for calmer days or at least profitable trade. Lieutenant Harris unfurls a parchment Commodore's orders anchor at precise range, hail the river forts with an ultimatum and fire only if fired upon. You study the coordinates, 700 yards, shallow enough to risk grounding, but close enough to make your cannon's shot count. You glance at the draft gauge 2.5 feet below the keel. Shallow rapids lurk around the next bend, a hidden hazard that could strand you under enemy fire. The engine room's rumble intensifies as HMS Borderer edges forward, her paddle wheels churning green-brown water into foam. You grip the rail heart, thundering with each piston stroke. Above you, the commander stands at the bow, binoculars, raised silhouette framed by fortress walls. His polished brass epaulets catch the light, a symbol of authority that must persuade or cow. Suddenly, a bugle sounds from the fort's ramparts. A messenger boat approaches, crewed by Qing officials in silk robes, waving a white flag. You lean forward. This is the imperial ultimatum in motion. The courier's lacquered box contains a demand for immediate withdrawal and apology for navigational trespass. You feel the tension tighten, fire on that boat, and you ignite war. Back down and gunboat diplomacy risks losing face. Lieutenant Harris signals the captain. The steam hiss abates. You exhale slowly, sensing that next moment will set the tone, whether this is just another bargaining tactic or the prelude to volley and plank. Ahead, the courier's boat nudges the gunboat's bow lacquer, peeling under your gaze. The Commodore's voice rings out. Explain our sovereign right to sail unmolested, and await reply, no shot, unless ordered. You nod, feeling the weight of empire and protocol hinge on measured words and iron wills. You lean into the wind-whipped spray, ready for either diplomacy's pen or warfare's fuse. The river holds its breath with you, a silent witness to a contest of steel steam and sober negotiation. The Qing envoy's small boat drifts alongside HMS Borderer oars, dipping in wary rhythm as lacquered sides creak under the river's pull. You probably won't grasp the full drama of delivering an imperial ultimatum until you feel the tension crackling between polished brass and silk robes. But then again, few moments in gunboat diplomacy hum as fiercely as this. Commodore Sir William Parker stands on Borderer's quarterdeck, naval cap tilted against drizzle, voice steady as he beckons the Qing negotiator, Ye Mingchen's representative, aboard. The envoy steps onto the ramp with hesitant grace, fear glinting in his jade-green sash. His escort of mandarins' robes, gleaming with dragon embroidery, looms behind like silent standards of imperial will. You notice the hush among the crew sailors, leaning on bulwarks, steel boots planted in the smoke-scented mist. Harris descends a few steps to greet the envoy. Diplomatic niceties follow a respectful nod, flowery English courtesy offset by the envoy's measured kowtow. You catch fragments of Mandarin through an interpreter's soft murmurs. Her Majesty demands righteous passage, tribute to the emperor, phrases heavy with historical weight. You recall that earlier that morning the Commodore's sealed orders were precise demand-free navigation on the Yangtze, in perpetuity indemnity for past offenses, and establishment of a consulate at Wusong itself. The ultimatum's ink still glistens on the parchment, its language crafted for both threat and concession. If Qing officials refuse Borderer and her consorts will open fire on every river fort from Wusong to Shanghai. The envoy unfurls his own scroll, a rebuttal penned in gilded characters invoking the Celestial Empire's sovereignty and warnings of the barbarian pilferers. He speaks interpreter-echoing phrases about ancient tributary systems, moral duty, and heaven's favor. Commodore Parker listens, brow furrowing beneath salt spray, then offers a perfunctory bow. Only then does he gesture to a junior officer who presents a second document, the British ultimatum, in crisp Mandarin, its phrases stoic and unyielding. You step forward, heart pounding, as the interpreter's voice bridges worlds. Should Your Excellency decline these terms within 2 hours, Her Majesty's ships will commence bombardment at high tide. Silence follows, thick as storm clouds. The envoy's lips press into a thin line. His eyes flick to his mandarins, who murmur urgent counsel behind silken fans. Around you, the river's current swirls tea-colored water, carrying driftwood and fallen leaves downstream. You sense history itself flowing between these two vessels, each side testing the other's mettle. The envoy clears his throat, voice low. He requests an audience with Governor Ye before delivering a final reply, citing protocol. Commodore Parker grants the request, but warns that any delay beyond the deadline seals Qing Port's fate. You feel time constrict 2 hours until cannon smoke or diplomatic ink decide whether the Yangtze remains a sovereign artery or an imperial thoroughfare. Harris motions you back, tension replaced by urgent whispers. The envoy retreats to his boat steps, descending into lacquered gloom, as if sinking beneath centuries of tributary tradition. At the gangway's edge, you watch the mandarins slip away, robes trailing like shadows. Their boat pulls off slow, deliberate heading upriver toward Wusong's city gates. Commodore Parker signals the paddle wheels. Borderer backs off to anchor just beyond clear cannon range. You inch alongside the rail, scanning the stone bastions where Qing gunners observe from arrow slits and barbicans. A single red flag snaps above the fort's parapet, a warning of impending hostilities. Keel to mud, the tide carries that flag's message straight to your chest. You recall that Wusong's defenses include 6 iron cannon atop ramparts and nightly torch-lit drills to repel river intruders. This is no ceremonial contest. It's a test of wills measured in steel and steam. Back on deck, sailors hustle to clear gun decks, prime carronades, and ready grape shot. You see powder monkeys Young crewmen in frock coats scuttle across planks bearing bags of black powder. Each holds a fuse lighter clipped to his belt, the sparks betrayal of one misstep, sending men, ship, and diplomacy into chaos. You turn to the Commodore, who stands with binoculars, raised, eyes fixed on Wusong's distant silhouette. His voice, thorny with resolve, drifts through the damp air. Messengers shall return by high tide, or we speak with iron. His pronouncement drips with the iron law of gunboat diplomacy, and so the river's mouth becomes a stage where cannons and treaties duel for supremacy. You close your eyes and breathe in the river's brine and gunmetal's tang, preparing for whatever springs from this 2-hour countdown. Diplomatic niceties have ceded to a silent promise, either free passage or thunderous reprisal, an ultimatum flung across water rather than parchment. The Yangtze holds its breath, with you channeling world history into a narrow tide of steam steel and the fragile hope that rational talk can outlast iron shot. You strain at the wheel as HMS Borderer groans into the swirling rapids above Wusong, steam pistons rattling like metallic hearts pounding against the river's rocky throat. You probably won't feel the full force of these currents until you're waist-deep in churning eddies. But then again, few river passages demand as much grit as the Yangtze's upper reaches. Below decks, the engineer calls out, reducing to half-stern thrust, stand by for sheer. The paddle wheels slow, then spin backward against the river's surge. Water slapping the hull in angry tides. You brace yourself against the rail boots, sliding on wet deck plates, and lean into the storm of spray. A mainstream fact, the Yangtze Rapids between Wusong and Suzhou feature strong currents exceeding 5 knots and hidden shoals rising within feet of the surface, making navigation deadly, without accurate charts or local pilots. Historians still argue whether early steam launches or traditional junks proved more reliable on these rapids, but tonight you witness both modern iron and time-tested timber wrestling the same waters. Ahead, sandbanks invisible beneath swirling foam loom like ancient traps. Lieutenant Harris shouts coordinates from the chart table. 2 degrees starboard, full ahead. You twist the wheel, steel spokes cold under your fingers. The helm moves sluggishly, water tearing at the hull with each command. A quirky tidbit flickers through your thoughts. One junior officer once claimed he used his grandmother's graveyard garden gnome as a good luck charm during these rapids, strange superstition in the face of natural fury. But after 3 safe passages, no one dared mock the gnome's potency. You glance at the binnacle, its compass needle quivers as though startled by unseen rocks. Through the mist you glimpse a jagged shoal just inches below the surface. Powder brown water swirls around, basalt stones slick with algae. The gunboat's hull grinds in protest rivet seams, grown like old wounds. You bite back a curse grit, flashing between your teeth. Below you, engineers open the keel valves to jettison excess water trimming draft by inches that feel like lifelines. A cheer cracks the air when the bow lifts over the shoal water, cascading off the paddles in roaring waterfalls. You exhale, heart pounding, as adrenaline rushes from river's teeth into your veins. But the river tests you again. A sudden eddy clutches the stern, spinning the gunboat sideways toward a hidden rock ledge. You pivot on your heels, wrench the wheel port, and bark orders. All stop. Steam belts, hiss, paddles, pause mid-stroke, and the hull shudders against the current. Deckhands scramble to secure lines and brace themselves. As you steady the vessel, you recall that Qing River pilots once guided coal junks through these rapids using bamboo poles and rope pulleys to haul against the flow. Their intimate knowledge of every shoal and whirlpool kept cargo moving long before steam's roar. Historians still debate whether such local expertise should have been relied upon sooner by Western navies. But tonight you're grateful for the pilot standing at your side. The Yangtze's rapids remain unmoved by treaties or gunboat salvos. In this torrent, technology and tradition collide, every rivet, paddle, and pole a testament to human will against a watery giant. You straighten your coat hair, plastered to your brow by spray, and prepare to meet the next bend, where more hidden hazards await. You grip the polished mahogany wheel as HMS Borderer plunges upriver, the Yangtze's currents roaring in your ears like a living thing. You probably won't feel the full force of these waters until you sense each undertow tugging at the hull. But here, where Britain's steam age collides with China's ancient river, you find yourself wrestling the unexpected. Below decks, the stoker shouts a warning. High steam engines at half ahead. The pistons clank and spit, steam hissing from safety valves as the paddle wheels slow. Ahead, the river narrows between mist-shrouded banks, where oyster beds and willows share space with hidden shoals. Local junks, flat-bottomed, weather-beaten vessels, hide in alcoves, their pilots watching your iron leviathan with bent backs and wary eyes. A mainstream fact, by 1857, the Yangtze Rapids between Wusong and Nanjing tested even the most modern vessels. Currents reaching up to 6 knots, submerged rocks just feet below the surface, and unpredictable whirlpools that ground shipments to a halt. Historians still argue whether steam power truly conquered these perils or merely tamed them at great risk and cost. Whatever the verdict tonight, you navigate both chart and instinct. You lean into the rail, feeling the spray of muddy water wash over your boots, and scan the banks for landmarks the pilot promised, an old pagoda's silhouette and a curve in the willow line. You catch sight of the pagoda's rooftop peeking through low haze, 4 tiers of upturned eaves, its crimson lacquer dulled by years of mist and neglect. Only then do you realize your compass and charts merely approximate. Here, human guidance counts more than any foreign map. Lieutenant Harris stands by your side, brow furrowed beneath drenched forelock. He points upriver, Prepare for the Dragon's Tooth Bend. Hundreds of fatalities there. Last year, when crews misjudged slackwater, you nod recalling tales of stranded junks smashed against submerged basalt crews, swept away like straw. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. One daring pilot once rigged a bamboo ladder along the hull so he could clamber out at low tide to inspect rocks, an improvisation both ingenious and utterly reckless. Steam hisses, pistons quake. Borderer tilts into the current's embrace as paddles bite green waves. You issue commands, hard to starboard, angle her bow upstream. The wheel turns with sluggish resistance, copper spokes slick under your glove. The stern yawls water, roiling in backwash, and you hold fast as the hull grinds over a hidden shoal plank, flexing against unseen stones. Below, the engineer hollers, "Water in the bilge." A leak floods the bilge pump's intake. The pumps rattle as frantic as your heartbeat. The chief engineer curses and signals for reduced speed. You glance at the depth gauge, a mere 3 feet of clearance. Each inch matters. A miscalculation could mean grounding amid enemy fire. The river constricts further cliffs, rising like ancient ramparts, cloaked in bamboo forest. You recall that Chinese war junks once patrolled these corridors, their crews using long poles to push over rapids, guided by elder pilots with intimate knowledge of each rock's contour. They moved silently, blending wood and oath, an art you now respect as your steam hammer roars overhead. A sudden jolt, the wheel shudders in your hands as Borderer's hull scrapes a submerged ledge. Wood groans. You bark orders to shift to port bleach-stained deckhands, lurching to adjust steam throttle. The paddle wheels reverse for an instant, water churning into foam. Once free, you surge ahead, picking your way through a cluster of hostile rapids, more suited to junks than ironclads. Mist swirls around the conning tower eye-hole, forming ghostly shapes that vanish as the deckhands sponge away water. Through the fog, you glimpse another obstacle, a fellow of rocks called the White Fang, named for the foam cresting each stone. You plot a course narrow channel between the second and third reefs, where water dips briefly into calmer eddies. Ready the hauling lines, you shout, recalling Qing pilot's trick of trailing rope from bow to bank, allowing men to pull vessels past shallow choke points. Borderer's crew flings hemp ropes forward. 3 essentials scramble to shore, hands gloved and muscles straining. With each pull, the gunboat inches upstream. You feel the momentum shift, modern steam bowing to ancient muscle. Above you, gun ports rattle as the hull trembles. Every rivet complains. A crewman whispers, "Would rather face Wu Sung Fort's cannons than these rapids again." You laugh dryly. The irony tastes of salt and soot. Commanded by coal and brass, you now rely on rope and manpower to navigate this watery crucible. Finally, the river steadies a broad stretch where islands divide the flow. You breathe more easily as steam hisses back to full strength, paddles resuming steady churn. Harris relaxes his grip on the binnacle, glancing at you with a mix of relief and admiration. "We did it," he says, voice rasping from steam inhalation. "Yet you know better than to let guard down. Ahead lies Shanghai's defenses, stone forts bristling with cannon. For now, you've wrestled the Yangtze's fury and emerged unscathed. But the true test of gunboat diplomacy awaits, shelling those ramparts and forcing open the treaty ports. You wipe dripping hair from your eyes and prepare for bombardment, heart steady as the steam whistle's final shriek. You grip the wet rail as HMS Borderer and her consorts glide into range of the Shanghai river forts, the morning light glinting off their iron muzzles, poised like predatory jaws. You probably won't feel the full impact of those 32-pounder carronades until your ears ring and the air vibrates with concussive roars. But then again, few spectacles match the raw power of steam-driven shells tearing into centuries-old ramparts. The first shell leaves a crimson plume on the river's mirror, arching toward the teak fort's earthen embankment. You watch through the gun port as the shot strikes with a thunderous crash, sending spattered mud and fragments skyward like gory fireworks. A mainstream fact, during the Second Opium War, British gunboats fired over 1,200 shells at Shanghai's river defenses in just 3 days of bombardment, demonstrating unprecedented naval firepower far upriver. Historians still argue whether such concentrated shelling truly broke Qing resolve or mainly terrorized civilian populations into conceding treaty terms. But tonight, you see both steel-on-earth destruction and frightened onlookers scrambling for cover. You steady your stance as a second salvo thunders from Borderer's sister ship, HMS Vanguard. The echo collides with your ribs, jolting you backward. Below your feet, the deck plates hum with each concussion. A quirky tidbit drifts in your mind. One gunner swore he hung a string of onions over his carronade's touch hole to detect overheating. If the onions wilted too quickly, he'd pause between blasts to cool the barrel. Whether onions or steel gauges proved more reliable remains a subject of mess deck legend. Ahead, the river bank quakes as more iron balls pummel stone and soil. You spot the Chongming Fort's flagpole shatter and the yellow banner topple into the moat below. Warships coordinate their fire. 3 hard volleys. Then, a shift to lighter 18-pounder long guns aimed at loopholes where Qing gunners peer through. You witness grape shot tearing down wooden palisades, each iron ball ricocheting off timber, splintering planks. Aboard Borderer, you duck as a misfire's burst of flame erupts beside the carronade, a reminder that gunpowder's volatility spares neither friend nor foe. The lieutenant snarls. Clear the deck, sailors lash tarpaulins over the breach and sponge the bore with vinegar-soaked rags to suppress sparks. Quirky talk among the crew claims that vinegar not only dampens embers, but imparts a hiss that scares nervous powder monkeys, an idea as pungent as it is untested. You lean over the rail to gauge the fort's reaction. Qing defenders scramble behind earthen revetments, their archaic artillery, muzzle-loading iron guns mounted on wooden carriages, blunting many shells, but quivering under repeated punishment. You note defenders reloading slowly by hand, ramming heavy iron balls down dampened barrels, each pause a rare opening for your gunboats. The Commodore's signal flags snap above the quarterdeck, concentrate on wall's base. Borderers' carronade crews adjust elevation, turning their muzzles low. The next salvo tears chunks from the embankment's foundation, undercutting its stability. You watch in fascination as a seam of soil collapses, moat water rushing in to swamp the inner gun platform. A cheer rises from British decks. Below Qing, soldiers retreat behind secondary embankments, leaving behind abandoned cannon, swaying precariously. Smoke drifts over the river, mingling with wood smoke from burning magazines ashore. You cough, vision blurred by haze, and recall that magazines held both hotshot and incendiary shells intended to set palisades alight. You crane your neck at the smoldering remains of two wooden towers, their scorched timbers collapsing in blackened tongues of flame. Amid the roar, you overhear deckhands swapping rumors. One claims a nearby fort's commander once urged his men to paint cannon with dragon motifs, believing illusory fire breath would intimidate gunboats. Whether dragons or powder did the trick, the wooden towers now smolder like vanquished beasts. As Borderer lurches toward the next target, you watch the ship's unrelenting advance. The third fort, stacked with granite blocks, stands tall, its massive stones absorbing shell after shell. Mortar seams cracking like jaws under hammer blows. You grip your cap as the ship's wheels turn, aiming broadside volley to direct curses at that stubborn bastion. Lieutenant Harris barks orders, double-shotted, grape the loopholes next. You help load canister rounds, hundreds of small iron balls packed into wooden cases, and train the gun low. A deafening blast sends the canister's lethal swarm into the embrasures, ripping through defenders' ranks. You see a Qing musket volley answered by shrapnel bodies thrown back in twisted arches. The river bank's sodden earth slick with crimson, you realize that gunboat diplomacy's polite veneer conceals brutal reality. Through the smoke you glimpse local merchants watching anxiously from behind bamboo screens, silk robes fluttering as they calculate losses and futures. They clutch balance sheets thicker than ancient scrolls, numbers dancing in their heads as cannonballs rewrite trade prospects. You wonder if their ledgers can account for shattered fortifications and shattered lives alike. You turn back to Borderer's deck as the final iron ball strikes, cracking the granite face of the third fort. A rumble, stones tumbling into the moat, announces victory. Commodore's flag flies from the mizzenmast, white over blue, the colors of capitulation. You allow yourself a rare smile. These forts have fallen in a hollow of iron and steam, opening the Yangtze's gates to treaty ports. As the last echoes fade, borderers' boats pull alongside drifting fort debris. You prepare launch parties to secure the ruined works. Boarding planks, grappling hooks, and cutlasses ready. The river lies before you, its course altered by gunpowder and treaty, its peace bought at the price of swollen gun smoke and diplomatic coercion. You wipe soot from your brow and gaze upriver. Shanghai awaits under new terms. But the memory of this bombardment will linger in splintered stone and trembling hearts. In gunboat diplomacy, force writes the prelude to negotiation, each shell punctuating the sentence of commerce in imperial ink. You step ashore at the smoldering ruins of Teak Fort, the earth still quivering from yesterday's bombardment. Mist hangs low over the riverbank, and your boots sink into waterlogged mud as you seek out the local pilots promised by the Shanghai merchants. You probably won't appreciate the value of their river knowledge until you're stranded on a sandbar in the dark. But after today's shelling, you'd trust these guides with your life over any map. A small party of Chinese pilots, gray-haired men in rain-stained tunics, wait beneath a sagging willow. Their faces are lined from decades of watching the Yangtze's moods. You introduce yourself through an interpreter, offering tea and tobacco as tokens of goodwill. The eldest pilot, Master Lin, nods, once eyes sharp as ospreys, then beckons you to follow. You clamber into a battered sampan. Its flat bottom barely rises above the muddy bank. Lin steadies the boat with a bamboo pole, feeling for depth. Around you, junks drift like ghosts among felled oaks, remnants of Qing fleet skirmishes. A layer of detritus, tea leaves, driftwood, stray rice sacks sifts through the water, marking the river's fickle currents. Master Lin gestures upriver. Follow my voice. He bends low over the sampan's hull, cupping his hands as he intones a deep rhythmic chant that mimics the river's pulse. You strain to understand. Is it a code of sound reflections or prayer to the water spirits who guard hidden shoals? Suddenly, Lin grunts and points. You see a subtle ripple ahead, a submerged shoal, a dozen feet from the sampan's bow. Without him, your gunboat could have run aground here at full steam, ribs splintering on hidden rocks. The sampan's crew deftly poles around it as you exhale a breath you didn't realize you held. A mainstream fact. Shanghai pilots of the Qing era relied on oral traditions and brain-teased memories of shifting channels. No fixed charts could keep pace with silt deposits that altered the river's course each season. Historians still debate whether these indigenous methods outperformed Western-sounding lines in accuracy. But tonight, Master Lin's voice carries more authority than any European chart. You shift your weight awkwardly as the sampan drifts into the next channel. Another pilot, Young Wei, points to a faint current sheer along the bank, an undertow that could wedge a gunboat beam against submerged timber. He murmurs a warning in Wenzhou dialect. The interpreter relays strong backflow, stay closer to centerline. At the sampan's stern, a teenage deckhand cranks a long bamboo oar like a lever, lifting the prow over patches of sticky silt. You realize that high-tech steam engines have little meaning here without these human hands and ears guiding them beyond Wusong's rapids. Master Lin leans forward, voice low. Shanghai's forts lie only 2 river bends ahead. Shall I guide your boats? You nod, offering him a silk pouch of silver tails. He accepts with a nod of his bamboo hat, pressing it to his tunic, a rare sign of trust. Later, you stand on Borderer's deck as Master Lin and his sampan crew come aboard. Lin unfurls a hand-drawn reed chart, lines of reed, stitched onto silk mapping channels as ribbons twisting through the river's mouth. Red threads, safe depths at high tide. Blue threads, only at low. You place the reed chart next to the British hydrographic charts, noting how these local maps capture shifting shoals in real time. You guide the gunboat pilots through Lin's chart. Each river bend becomes a conversation. Here, strong current. Keep 5-degree bow upstream. Here, silt bank full steam to cross. Lin's reed lines guide your steam whistles and paddle wheel pulsing, the precise choreography of iron and bamboo melding into a single act of navigation. On deck, Lieutenant Harris marvels, "Without these men, we'd be drifting blind." You smile grimly. The peninsula's whitewashed fortifications will fall tomorrow, but these guides hold your path to safety tonight. As evening falls, you steam past willow-lined banks now lit by lanterns. Local fishermen returning to harvest crabs from shallow coves. They pause to watch your gunboats, giant metal whales blocking their river. You catch their wary eyes and raise a bow. The sampan pilots beside you dip their hats in return. Through the night's gloom, Borderer's lights blaze ahead. Guided by reed chart and pilot memory, you clear the final shoals before Shanghai channels that once barred any foreign vessel now lie open. Gunboat diplomacy's thunderous shells forced the city's concession. But tonight, it's the whispered counsel of these Chinese pilots that carries you safely through the Yangtze's treacherous embrace. You step onto Shanghai's quayside at dawn, the air thick with river mist and muted cries of curiosity from merchants and townspeople gathered along the wharf. You probably won't feel the weight of their capitulation until you see white flags fluttering above shuttered shops. But then again, few moments in colonial diplomacy carry as much tension as a city forced to its knees. Ahead, Qing officials stand on a raised platform of bamboo scaffolding, their yellow silk banners lowered to half-mast. They clutch scrolls of treaty drafts, quills, poised faces etched with reluctant resolve. Opposite them, British officers, red-coated medals gleaming, arrange parchment and inkwells upon a hastily erected table draped in Union Jack bunting. Between the two camps, Shanghai's wealthy merchants hover in silk robes and embroidered gowns, clutching ledgers and commodity samples, tea chests, silk rolls, and porcelain vases, hoping their goods survive this forced opening. A mainstream fact on July 6, 1858, Shanghai officials officially surrendered the city to British and French forces, opening it as a treaty port under the Treaty of Tientsin's terms. Historians still argue whether this capitulation was driven more by military intimidation or internal power struggles among Qing elites, but today you see elements of both steel hull coercion and courtly indecision. Lieutenant Harris steps forward, ceremonially unfurling a summons from Consul Parks, all customs duties to be adjusted to fixed low rates, foreign merchants granted residence and trade rights within designated concessions. He reads the clauses aloud, each phrase a bitter pill for local officials. The chief Qing negotiator, Governor Chen Baozhen, bows deeply, lips pressed to his scroll, before nodding once, voice quavering, "We accept these articles for the welfare of Shanghai's people." A ripple of tension passes through the merchant class. You catch the eye of Mr. Zhang, an elderly tea exporter whose family has traded along the Yangtze for generations. He folds his arms, gaze drifting to his warehouse's shuttered doors, full of teas, now subject to foreign tariffs and regulations. A quirky detail surfaces. Rumor has it Mr. Zhang once smuggled opium consignment free through waiting junks by sealing crates of tea with wax from sandalwood trees, a feat of entrepreneurial audacity now rendered moot by official treaty ports. Across the concession line, marked by a painted post, you see French and American consuls negotiating their own spheres of influence. American Consul Ward whispers into his silver pocket watch, watching British sailors hoist a Union Jack on the British concessions flagpole. Shanghai's skyline, once unified under yellow imperial banners, now boasts multiple foreign flags, a rainbow of extraterritorial enclaves. You move closer as Baker & Company's principal, Mr. Samuel Baker, steps forth. His voice rings clear. "We guarantee the safe passage of Qing grain shipments upriver, no interference, so long as duties are promptly paid in silver taels." His handshake with a Qing commissioner echoes across the dock, a pact balancing mercantile promise against sovereign pain. A contingent of British Marines maintains a vigilant cordon, muskets slung, but bayonets fixed, silent reminders that treaty enforcement rests on naval guns and disciplined infantry. You recall that during the initial talks, Commodore Parker threatened to bombard Shanghai's foreign quarter if demands weren't met, an ultimatum that set the tone for acquiescence. Scholars still debate whether such shows of force constituted legitimate coercion or piracy under a pretense of law. As ink dries on the treaties, you witness an improvised ceremony. Qing officials present British officers with ceremonial tea bowls from the imperial kilns, gilded with dragons, in-flight gifts meant to signify good faith and harmony. You smile at the bittersweet irony symbols of China's refined culture, now ushering in its era of semi-colonial subjugation. Merchants step forward, signing individual agreements. You see, Portuguese traders claim a narrow strip of waterfront. Italian silk dealers map out workshops in new concessions, and American missionaries secure plots for churches and schools, each signature a brick in the new edifice of Shanghai's hybrid identity. You wander among the watching crowd, feeling their mixture of relief and resentment. Shopkeepers latch their doors, fearing loss of control over their customer base. Sailors prowl the streets, offering rudimentary English phrases in exchange for hot kanji. Children dart between uniformed officers, tugging trousers for coins or biscuits. A sudden shout rings out. A Qing cannon detonates a ceremonial salute, its echo bouncing off masonry and signaling formal end of hostilities. Smoke swirls overhead, mingling with summer humidity. As border lines firm on paper, you realize Shanghai's surrender was more than a military capitulation. It was the birth of a new city-state partitioned by foreign powers, yet anchored in Chinese ambition. Lieutenant Harris claps you on the shoulder. Welcome to Treaty Port life. You glance toward the river, where gunboats idle like sentries. Beyond them, glimmering shopfronts await their first foreign customers. The river, once a lifeline to the empire's heart, now courses through multiple sovereignties. Ahead, emissaries begin drafting administrative guidelines, quarantine rules, policing regimens, and tariff schedules. Shanghai's governance will now blend Qing codes with British law, a tangled tapestry of jurisdictions. Workers downriver load crates of opium and silk onto foreign ships, the river's flow of commerce redirected by imperial decree. You take a final deep breath of humid air, thick with change. The city's pulse shifts under your feet, once ruled by mandarins and adorned by dragons, now grafted with foreign consulates and merchant titans. The Yamash River's tides continue oblivious to treaties and gunboats carrying both the old ways and new ambitions into tomorrow. As you step away from the surrendered docks, treaty scroll in hand, you ponder whether Shanghai's forced opening will bring prosperity, exploitation, or both. History's ink has dried here, but its ripple across China's vast expanse is just beginning. You settle into the cramped consular office in Shanghai's British concession, the midday sun slanting through oil-stained glass and illuminating maps pinned over every spare inch of wall. You probably won't endure the stifling tension of these meetings without your shoulders tightening at each diplomatic nuance. But after today's cannon blasts and broken treaties, even talk feels like a battleground. Opposite you, a Qing delegation mandarins in high collars and fur-lined robes perch on stiff wooden chairs, faces inscrutable behind silk fans. Their chief negotiator, Elder Wu, taps a lacquered snuff bottle against his palm, the ritual crack echoing in the hush. On your side sits British Consul General Rutherford, pen in hand, spectacles perched on the bridge of his nose, ready to etch every syllable into the ledger of extraterritorial jurisprudence. A mainstream fact under the Treaty of Tientsin, signed in 1858. Foreign powers gained the right to establish legations and consular courts in treaty ports, a seismic shift in China's legal landscape that scholars still debate as either pragmatic modernization or imperial overreach. Tonight you witness the uneasy limbo between those ideals, new courts erected, but no agreed processes yet defined. The translator clears his throat and begins. Consul General requests clarification on Qing enforcement of customs duties under Article 6. Elder Wu leans forward, eyes narrowing. The Celestial Emperor's laws remain supreme. Any foreign court here must respect Chinese sovereignty. His tone is firm, a coded refusal to cede legal ground. Rutherford's inked quill hovers over parchment. He sighs, adjusting his cravat. Our merchants cannot operate with inconsistent rulings. We require fixed tariffs and impartial adjudication. He glances at you seeking support. You nod, though your gut tightens. Every concession here risks further erosion of Qing authority. The mandarins exchange glances while the junior British attaché shuffles treaty text. A junior Qing scribe murmurs corrections in classical Chinese, adding footnotes about protection of Confucian rights. Each clause drips with implication trade rights owed at the price of cultural enmeshment. A quirky aside flickers through your mind. One British lawyer once tried to import an English judge to Shanghai, only for the Qing to counter-nominate a magistrate from Suzhou, each insisting on their own puppet court. Neither judge ever crossed swords with a verdict. Rutherford drips diplomatic honey. Perhaps a mixed commission. British and Qing judges sitting side by side. He sketches a circle and line diagram on the map, two equal chambers merging into one. Elder Wu's smile is thin. Such arrangements may breed deadlock, he replies. Better to clarify sovereignty first. The translator's words fall like stones. Silence stretches. Through the window, you glimpse French diplomats in their own concession, gathered around a separate table. Their red-coated consul signals, with a discreet hand, have the British conceded too far? Have the Qing stalled with feigned authority? You clear your throat, standing to pace behind the consul's desk. Gentlemen, our merchants' goods sit rotting in warehouses awaiting final tariff schedules. Disputes over duty ports and legal jurisdiction cost daily interest and cargo value. Your voice echoes off the paper-clad walls. Without swift resolution, the treaty ports risk becoming ghost towns. Elder Wu's expression softens slightly, a concession to practical reality. He stares at the ledger. The Emperor may allow designated ports to fix tariff rates, provided that no loss of face Tianxia occurs. His fingers trace characters for all under heaven, reminding everyone that even in acquiescence, Qing retains cosmic primacy. Rutherford allows a small nod pen, at last, touching paper. Minutes later, the translator's voice floats across the room. Agreement reached for provisional tariffs at 3 specified ports: Shanghai, Ningbo, and Xiamen. Judicial procedures to be defined within 6 months. The British delegation exhales. The Qing allow a slender smile. You slump into a chair, scraping ink from your fingertip. Disputes over law remain unresolved, but at least trade can start. Merchant ledgers will reopen stevedores return, and opium crates move once more under extraterritorial cover. Yet, you know this temporary victory rests on shifting sands. 6 months is ample time for new quarrels. As negotiators close their scrolls, Elder Wu bows. May this accord serve both empires in harmony. Rutherford inclines for mutual benefit and lasting peace. Cameras contraband in this era would capture the graciousness. You capture it in your worn journal, each word a time-stamp in imperial friction's slow grind. Leaving the office, you cross the concession boundary marker, a narrow gap in a low brick wall topped with iron spikes. On the Chinese side, you see porters hauling chests of tea under Qing tariffs. On the foreign side, carriers roll barrels of sugar under lower duties. The disparity glows like neon. Legal umbrellas, shelter, different cargo, different wallets. You pause at a street market, merchants exchanging ledgers for small silver taels. A Chinese clerk hisses to a British wine trader, your customs official demands another 0.5%, a reminder treaties only clarify beginnings, not forever. The trader shrugs. Such is commerce's price. You note their weary eyes, both parties fatigued by negotiation's slow dance. As twilight falls, the concession's gas lamps flicker to life. Through lantern glow, you glimpse Shanghai's silhouette, a patchwork of Qing pagodas and foreign rooftops, each lit with possibility and unease. Gunboat diplomacy's thunder subsided, for now, leaving legal debates to fill the void. You tuck treaty scrolls into your coat and step into the humid dusk, knowing that pragmatic stalemate has given way to a fragile balance. The Yangtze's tides will turn soon with seasonal floods, and with them the city's fortunes. But tonight, diplomacy holds sway, however uneasy, like a single paddle stroke through the tumultuous currents of history. You lean over the bulwarks as HMS Borderers launches cut through morning haze, the oarsman's rhythm echoing against willow-lined banks. You probably won't appreciate the chaos of riverine skirmishes until you're elbow-deep in rigging and splinters. But then again, few fights are as personal as close-quarters clashes on the Yangtze's glassy surface. The launches, 4 in all, carry cutlasses, boarding pikes, and small swivel guns loaded with buckshot. Behind you, The gunboat's bigger guns rest silent, their thunder reserved for forts. Ahead, a squadron of Qing River junks drifts into a narrow channel, oars, raised painted dragons curling along their hulls, their crews matelots in loose cotton and straw hats, brandish bamboo poles sharpened to a point. Lieutenant Harris issues a terse command, "Show no mercy, clear the riverbank." You grip your boarding pike, heart pounding with the promise of steel-on-wood combat. The launch's bow slides alongside the nearest junk's railing. A meager plank must suffice as gangway. You leap across splinters flying and land on wet teak. A Qing sailor lunges with a hooked pole, aiming to swipe at your legs. You sidestep, pivoting to drive your pike through his shielded forearm. A crack echoes. He howls and collapses over the rail, disappearing into the river's tea-colored swirl. Nearby, another junk's gunwale groans as a boarding party scrambles up, cutlasses and pikes clashing amid overturned baskets of rice. A mainstream fact during the Second Opium War, river skirmishes frequently pitted steam launches against traditional junks, forcing Qing sailors to adapt ambush tactics along narrow channels. Historians still debate whether these skirmishes hardened local resistance or simply demonstrated Western technological and tactical dominance. But tonight you see both bravery and obsolescence in each encounter. You parry a cutlass/steel, ringing, then rip your boarding knife free, driving it into the attacker's shoulder. He staggers back, blood marring his yellow robe. You hack at his pole, severing it, and he drops the weapon with a splintered crack. Around you, boarding axes hew at oars, collapsing them into the water. Junks tilt oars, shudder, and crews leap into launches to continue the fight. A quirky detail drifts in your mind. One British sailor swore he once attached bells to his boarding pike so defenders could hear his approach. The ringing, he claimed, unnerved his opponents. No bells jangle here, only the harsh bark of orders and the metallic clang of blades. Between junks, the launch's swivel guns open up, crack, and send a spray of buckshot into the next vessel. You glimpse a Qing commander in silken brocade, shouting orders, his mitts blocking a boarding pike thrust. You lunge, hooking him with your pike and wrenching him off balance. He flails as you haul him across the rail. The launch's deck crew secures him with rope, rendering him moot. Above the melee, the willow branches sway their leaves, raining onto oars and splintered decks. You nearly slip, catching yourself on a half-shattered lantern. Oil drips, hissing on wet wood. You duck as someone fires a pistol. From the junk's stern, lead zips past your ear. You spin, bring your knife up, and block another boarder's blade. Sparks fly. A sudden shout, "Clear for ram." One launch's captain aims his pointed bow at the largest junk, driving it into the side with a crack that roars across the water. The junk's hull creaks, water oozing in. Steam launches follow up ramming and boarding until all junks list heavily or founder. Amid the clamor, you pause to catch breath, chest heaving beneath your frock coat. Around you, Qing sailors either yield swim for the bank or continue fighting with desperation in their eyes. You find yourself face to face with a teenage powder monkey, his musket misfiring eyes wide. You press your pike's shaft against his chest. He quails and drops the musket. You nod, and he backs away, shaken but unharmed. A senior Qing officer raises a white cloth scratched onto a bamboo pole. Launch crews seize the signal. Swivels cease their bark. You see that 3 junks have been captured, 2 sunk, and 1 fled upstream. You trudge across a soaked gunwale to survey the carnage, floating splinters, abandoned oars, and injured sailors clinging to railings. Lieutenant Harris calls you back to the launch. You scramble aboard, boots dripping, as crews secure prisoners. The captured junks will be towed back to the gunboats, their oars bundled for evidence and trophies. You glance at the willow-lined shore locals, peep from behind reeds, watching this foreign war unfold in their backyard. Some applaud, others hide eyes fearful. A few launches toward the bank, dragging survivors from the water. You step aside as a rescued junk captain, cloaked in soaked silk, gestures, thanks lips trembling. The interpreter murmurs, he fears his family left behind. You offer him a thermos of tea. He accepts with a nod of humility. Back on the deck of Borderer, you watch as gunboats roll up the captured junks, their prisoners shackled. The river returns to uneasy calm, wake ripples marking the path of violence. A gunboat's bosun rings the bell. All hands reconvene. You sheath your boarding knife, the splinters biting at your palms. You catch Lieutenant Harris's eye and salute. 6 junks neutralized you, report voice still hoarse. He nods, checking his logbook, rivers secure. For now, message the forts they're next if they resist. You exhale, wiping grit and blood from your knife. The Yangtze's pulse slow resets, but its banks bear the scars of this riverine skirmish. As the launches prepare to tow prizes upriver, you lean against the bulwark and watch willow shadows drift across the water, silent witnesses to the clang of pikes and the roar of engines. Tonight, you'll chart the captured junks in your journal and tally prisoners for adjudication in the new extraterritorial courts. But first, you breathe in the willow-scented air, tasting salt blood and the copper tang of victory in close quarters. You settle into the dim glow of a lacquered council hall in Beijing's Forbidden City, the air heavy with incense and the low murmur of courtiers in jade-adorned robes. You probably won't feel the true gravity of the emperor's edict until you see ministers' faces blanch at the ivory scroll. But then again, few documents stir such stormy debate under gilded roofs. At the center of the grand table lies the edict, its black characters embossed on yellow silk. Cease hostilities on the Yangtze, accede to foreign terms, and opened treaty ports forthwith. A mainstream fact on October 24, 1858, the Xianfeng Emperor formally ratified the Treaty of Tientsin under imperial decree, marking a stark departure from isolationist policies maintained for centuries. Historians still argue whether this capitulation reflected pragmatic survival strategy or a betrayal of Confucian sovereignty. But in this hall, that debate ignites like cotton tinder. You watch as Grand Counselor Zheng Guofan rises, robes rustling, voice firm. These terms violate the tributary code. Our ancestors fought to protect China's dignity. To yield is to invite further incursions. His gaze sweeps the assembly. Some ministers nod in solemn agreement, their fans fluttering like anxious sparrows. Across from him, Viceroy Guiliang leans forward, fingers drumming the table. Our coffers are empty, our armies overextended. Better to sacrifice a city than provoke full-scale war across the northern banks. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Rumor claims Guiliang once hosted a banquet of European dishes, tomato stew, pickled cucumbers to impress Western envoys, only to have guests marvel at exotic chili soup and lick their spoons in delight. Whether that hospitality smoothed treaty talks remains myth, but it underscores his openness to foreign taste and necessity. The hall's eunuch stewards bow, scattering tea before each courtier. You lift the porcelain cup, a delicate blue and white scene of rivers and cranes, and take a slow sip. The liquid's warmth hums through your chest, a small comfort amid protocol's frost. You recall reading that Qing tea producers once shipped fine oolongs to Europe for diplomatic gifts, forging early cultural ties long before gunboats arrived. A hush falls as the emperor's envoy, the scholarly Prince Gong, clears his throat. His Hanfu's silk patterns catch lamp glow. He frames his words in measured tones. His Majesty's edict binds all under heaven. Debate may err, but order remains. He unfurls an annotated scroll summarizing concessions, indemnities, and port regulations, a legal scaffold for China's reluctant integration into global trade. Historians still debate whether Prince Gong's pragmatism laid groundwork for the self-strengthening movement or merely delayed collapse under reform's weight. But his presence here seals the moment. You scan the council-aged mandarins in black caps, grip their fans, eyes narrowing. Young clerks hover behind jade pillars, quills poised. One elderly minister lowers his fan to reveal trembling lips. Will our sons serve in foreign courts? Shall we barter precious silver for alien trinkets? The question hangs, charged like a loaded spring. Prince Gong gestures to Zheng Guofan. Your memorials shall be recorded, your concerns noted in the Grand Archive. Yet His Majesty commands compliance. Zheng bows, fan clicking closed. I submit, he murmurs, soft resolve in his voice. You lean forward, noting a small jade seal its dragon motif pressed at treaty's base. That seal, once used to bless imperial edicts on grain redistribution, now legitimizes foreign intrusion. A scholarly aside, some historians argue that the Treaty of Tientsin's legal framework paradoxically catalyzed China's modernizing reforms, even as it underscored imperial weakness. You sense that paradox here, a bitter pill that might one day reveal itself as the cure. As debate wanes, the hall's lacquered doors slide open. Eunuchs enter bearing trays of official copies, bound with red cords. You step forward to receive your scroll, hands trembling slightly. You heft its weight paper and ink heavier than any sword you've carried. Outside the city beyond the palace walls seems unchanged rooftops rising in gray tiers, smoke drifting from kitchen chimneys. But you know those streets will soon hum with foreign merchants, legal extraterritorial enclaves, and new customs houses enforcing port duties. Tonight, China's center has quietly shifted. You retreat to a private pavilion overlooking the lake's reflected moon, edict in hand. There, you unroll the scroll and read the clauses once more: indemnity payments, missionary rights, diplomatic legations, each line a scar on the empire's dignity. As you trace the imperial seal, your fingers press its dragon ridges, feeling both the edict's finality and the beginning of a new era. You pour a fresh cup of chrysanthemum wine, capturing its floral warmth. Each sip whispers resilience the empire has bent, not yet broken. In the hush of night, courtiers' debates fade beneath distant bells and the rustle of bamboo groves. The emperor's edict stands inviolate, a compass pointing China toward uncertain horizons. You close your eyes, letting wine and wisdom mingle. The court's fury has subsided into resigned acquiescence. The river's roar now echoes in marble halls, and in that quiet moment, you feel the weight of history, an empire's soul stretched between heaven's mandate and foreign might, poised on the cusp of transformation. You're aboard a small steamer named Caduceus, its narrow hull slicing upriver through the late autumn mist. The Yangtze's waters have grown calm again. No cannon fire, no boarding cries, just the hum of engines and the sharp slap of brackish spray against metal. You probably won't miss the shouting and the smoke, but the eerie quiet carries its own tension now. This stretch of the river coils between silted banks, tall reeds, whispering like an audience that's seen too much. You stand at the rail, coat collar up, watching the faint outlines of distant hamlets slide by gray-tiled roofs, pale figures in rice fields, fishing boats lashed together with drying nets that flutter like laundry. Below deck, the ship's diplomatic officer paces beside a teak writing desk, muttering aloud the terms of the Convention of Peking. A mainstream fact in 1860, the convention formally concluded the Second Opium War, compelling the Qing to cede territory, open more ports, and legalize the opium trade outright. Historians still debate whether the British ever truly expected compliance or simply planned to station naval presence indefinitely. Your job now: deliver sealed letters, final copies of the signed articles, to regional governors along the river. They'll know what it means before even breaking the wax. One officer joked earlier, "We bring peace the same way a knife brings quiet after the cut." You didn't laugh. The next stop is Zhujiang, a sleepy outpost. It once thrived as a porcelain port, but war has dimmed its luster. As the caduceus approaches the quay, you spot a contingent of Chinese soldiers waiting, not hostile, just weary. Their commander salutes stiffly, then offers tea before business. He's heard the terms already, of course. "We comply," he says simply, "but we remember." A quirky note you read in a British naval diary resurfaces during this phase of the war. One Yangtze patrol ship's crew held mock diplomatic pageants using borrowed opera costumes and lanterns. Some locals believed they were real emissaries from London. Others just enjoyed the show. You wonder if that absurdity, envoys in powdered wigs dancing beneath paper dragons, is more memorable than any clause in the treaty. You sit with the Chinese commander in a plain yamen building. Cracks mar the earthen floor. Over bowls of thick rice gruel, he describes how smugglers now run opium openly under the guise of legality. "The poison flows faster than the river," he mutters. You nod, unsure how to answer. One soldier outside plays a sorrowful tune on a daisy flute, notes curling like incense above war-tired rooftops. After the papers are signed and exchanged, your steamer departs. Another town, another seal, another weary nod. By the third port, you've memorized the hand motions, the ceremonial bows, even the awkward attempts at bilingual pleasantries. We accept, they say, but we resent. You lean on the ship's rail that evening, cup of strong green tea in hand. The moonlight turns the river silver, and in that reflection, the face of diplomacy seems both elegant and hollow. Somewhere upstream, missionaries are unpacking crates of Bibles and building timber chapels beside carved ancestral halls. Spiritual commerce, someone called it. Historians still argue whether the missionary presence was more about faith or foothold. But from here, both blend in the river's mirrored surface. The caduceus halts briefly at a sandbar to offload crates, marked with official wax, Inland Treaty Port Communications. Inside, not weapons, just paper. Dozens of translated proclamations, trade invoices, and customs instructions. The weapons, you suppose, were used to make sure those papers would be read. As the crates are carried ashore, you help steady the gangplank. One porter, a wiry man in a patched vest, glances at the stamps and shrugs. Another ruler, he says, "We've seen many." Then he vanishes down a narrow path flanked by banana trees. Later, over tinned sardines and cold-boiled potatoes, the diplomatic officer toasts you and the crew to peace, however it arrives. Someone grumbles to occupation. The toast stands anyway. Back in your bunk, you light a lantern and open a journal, its pages dotted with river spray and sweat. You write Zhujiang accepted, Yichang neutral. Next stop, Hankou. No resistance, only silence. And beneath that, this war ends not with thunder, but with rubber stamps. You blow out the lantern, lie back, and listen to the gentle rumble of the caduceus pressing upstream through fog and memory. You wake to soft sunlight sifting through canvas flaps, the gunboat's metal hull humming beneath your boots. Your morning begins not with cannon fire or sharp bugle calls, but with the clipped bark of an officer launch patrol. Armed escort, show the flag, and just like that your day resumes as a walking symbol of imperial negotiation. You climb into the longboat engine, sputtering armed Marines seated to your left, 2 Royal Engineers to your right. There's no crowd on the riverbank this morning, just children watching from thatch-roofed homes, their eyes unreadable, their clothes faded but neat. A rooster crows behind a garden wall, and the aroma of morning rice floats across the water. The mission today: conduct a show of force along a politically sensitive stretch between Hankou and Wuchang. The orders are clear. Be visible, remain courteous, stay armed. It's part ceremony, part theater. And like all good performances, the stakes are real. You drift past banners fluttering from fishing rafts, their owners rowing stiffly. On the horizon, you glimpse a hastily painted sign reading, "Foreign ships, this way." An unintended welcome, perhaps, or a weary act of compliance. A mainstream fact: gunboat diplomacy on the Yangtze became a regular tactic by 1861, with Britain, France, and the U.S. all deploying vessels to remind local authorities of treaty obligations. Historians still debate whether this coercion prevented greater bloodshed or merely postponed local rebellions. You dock at a village whose name you can't pronounce without insulting someone. A local magistrate meets your party with carefully rehearsed bows. He reads a prepared welcome from a silk scroll voice trembling. Behind him, townspeople observe silently. Mostly men-arms cross their expressions blank. One man spits on the ground, but no one reacts. You walk the perimeter with measured pace. Bayonets, up boots, clacking against the wooden dock. You pass the temple, the grain store, the schoolyard, where a chalkboard leans against a cracked wall. It reads, "Two rivers meet where people trade," a poetic nod to the Yangtze and Han, or maybe an ironic dig at current politics. A quirky tidbit catches your attention. One French patrol in this area painted their dinghy bright pink, claiming it eased tensions by appearing festive. It didn't. The boat was promptly stoned in 3 towns and renamed La Folie. Still, the absurd image sticks with you. At mid-morning, you're seated in a makeshift tea house. The magistrate serves bitter black leaves in cracked porcelain. The treaties. They are like the mist, he says. Some days thick, some days gone. You nod, not sure if this is metaphor or subtle complaint. The Marines behind you shift their weight, their rifles at ease, but always ready. Downriver, a British missionary hands out translated Bibles near the docks. You hear snippets of a sermon. The flood washed the sins of man. A woman in a blue tunic listens for a while, then walks away muttering, "We already have floods." You're handed a local map, a gift from the magistrate. It's meticulously hand-drawn, complete with dragons, river spirits, and a small caricature of a British gunboat labeled Iron Dragon that roars. You almost laugh. Almost. As you push off from the bank, one boy chases the boat, waving a piece of red cloth. You're not sure if it's goodbye protest or just childlike mimicry of flags. The boat's wake rocks him back, and he stumbles, catching himself on a stone. You look away. Later, back aboard the gunboat, the officer records the patrol's result. No resistance. Authority acknowledged. Spirits indifferent. A bland summary of a day steeped in tension. In your journal you write, "They see us. They bow. But the silence is thick." You take off your boots and let your feet cool against the cold deck. The river flows on beneath you, unbothered by diplomacy, unshaped by treaties. Just water and time. As night falls, the gunboat lights its lanterns. They flicker like fireflies across the inky current. Another patrol awaits tomorrow. Another village. Another silent acknowledgement. Historians still argue whether these shows of force built peace or merely ensured obedience. From where you sit, feet sore, tea, bitter eyes tired, it feels like a long floating question no one's quite answered. You're anchored now at Hanko's northern quay, the gangplank lowered with military precision. The caduceus sways gently in the morning tide, steam coils rising from her stacks like weary sighs. It's market day, and the docks are choked with people carts and the metallic cries of gulls feasting on fish guts. You step ashore in full uniform, not out of pride, but because the locals expect it. Visibility equals control. That's the game. Along the Yangtze, diplomacy happens in layers. Uniforms, rifles, tea, translated petitions, sometimes all within the same 30 minutes. You're here today for a different kind of engagement, something subtler. No scrolls to sign or treaties to deliver. Instead, a public audience with a Qing prefect who spent the last 2 weeks skirting appointments. Rumors say he's ill or terrified, or both. The foreign quarter is an odd blend of Cantonese roofs and Georgian columns. You pass a bookstore labeled Civilization and Commerce, its window filled with both Christian tracts and cigars. A missionary waves from a sunlit balcony, calling down glory to God and stable customs tariffs. You wave back, bemused. A mainstream fact, Hankou was one of the key treaty ports opened after the Second Opium War, and it rapidly became a hub for European and American commercial presence. Historians still debate whether its growth was fueled more by genuine market demand or colonial coercion. Probably both. And a little luck. The tea here is divine. Inside the yamen, it's cooler. Thick brick walls block the sun, and somewhere nearby a caged bird sings. The prefect enters, wearing a heavy brocade robe, face drawn, but composed. He does not bow. Instead, he speaks. The river brings letters, but the river also brings memory. You pause. Is this poetry or politics? He pours tea, himself a gesture both humble and deeply controlled. This tea, he says, is grown near Yichang. It has watched 3 emperors die. You take a sip. Smoky, dry. You nod. It's strong. He smiles slightly. Yes, it had to be. For the next hour, you discuss everything and nothing. Weather tariffs, grain tax, ship movements. The actual message that Britain remains present, armed and unyielding, hangs in the air like the scent of burnt incense. He knows. You know he knows. Outside, the prefect's guards shift restlessly. One rubs his sandal in slow, deliberate circles against a loose cobblestone. His spear has no tassel, either forgotten or a quiet protest. A young boy peeks from behind the garden wall, mouth stained with hawthorn candy, eyes fixed on your sword. A quirky tidbit flickers in memory during one French delegation's visit to Hankou. They mistakenly gifted the local governor a stuffed armadillo, thinking it a symbol of European resilience. The governor, confused but gracious, enshrined it in a temple as a spiritual guardian against bad trade. It's still there, reportedly. Back in the chamber, the prefect leans forward. We honor the agreements, he says, but we are not blind. You nod again, sensing more beneath the words. He taps the teacup's rim with one long fingernail, tap, tap, tap. A rhythm of irritation, fear defiance. You leave with a scroll, a minor commercial concession. Technically, a win. In truth, a stalemate with pleasantries. The prefect walks you to the gate, his robe trailing like a shadow. The Yangtze is wide, he says, but not endless. On the way back to the ship, you pass a schoolyard where children chant Confucian lines in unison. One girl breaks rhythm to stare at you. Her eyes are calm, unreadable. You tip your hat. She does not smile. That night, the Caduceus remains docked. The crew plays a slow card game under the deck lamps. A Marine hums a folk song. You write in your journal, Hankou progress achieved by holding still. Tea excellent. Armadillo legend confirmed. You lie on your cot, listening to the soft clink of the anchor chain, each link a quiet statement of presence. The river whispers against the hull, and you wonder how long these delicate games will hold. The monsoon begins with a whisper, not a roar. You first notice it in the sheen of sweat that refuses to evaporate, then in the sudden ominous stillness of the river. The Yangtze, once turbulent and vocal, now glides with deceptive calm, like a beast pausing to inhale. Aboard the caduceus, canvas awnings are lashed down and deckhands scramble to seal every hatch. A faint electric taste tingles in the air. Storms in the throat, says an old quartermaster, tapping the barometer's twitching needle. And sure enough, by nightfall, the rain begins. Not drops walls, curtains, an unrelenting deluge that drowns even your thoughts. A mainstream fact, the Yangtze's summer monsoon season was feared not only for flooding, but for its uncanny ability to paralyze entire fleets. Even shallow draft steamers, like the Caduceus, often had to anchor in midstream for days, riding out the tempest. Historians still argue whether some patrol routes were deliberately scheduled around storm forecasts, though meteorology back then was about as precise as dream interpretation. You pace the deck slowly, each step squelching in pooled water. Lightning cracks sideways across the sky, illuminating the jungle beyond the far bank. Brief flashes of soaked bamboo and startled egrets lifting off in silence. The thunder rolls in afterward, deep and long, like the river answering back. Below deck, a young ensign plays cards with himself, whispering names of forgotten ports: Qingqiang, Yichang, Lapa. You suspect he's never visited any of them. He deals a queen to an empty seat and chuckles. "You win again, Captain," he mutters. The crew tells stories to pass the time. One speaks of a Yangtze patrol that vanished in 1868, supposedly swept into a hidden whirlpool and swallowed whole. A quirky tidbit, yes, but also a superstition that still gives the cook the shivers. He taps the stove 3 times every morning, just in case. In the wardroom, your tea has gone cold. You stare out the porthole, watching the rain blur the world into a watercolor wash. Trees sway like dancers, the riverbank becomes a ghost, and the distant hills melt into the mist. Even your breath seems louder than usual. Suddenly, a bell rings, once then again. Not alarm, not emergency. Just the watch change. Still, it breaks the illusion of timelessness. You slip on your oilskin and head to the bridge. The helm officer nods as you arrive. Visibility down to 5 yards. He taps the compass. We're not drifting, but the river's trying to have its way. You squint into the dark. Shapes float by, branches, bamboo rafts. One time even an entire pig pen, no pig, thankfully. The Yangtze doesn't just rise during monsoon, it devours. A moment of humor, someone has chalked a mustache onto the Chartroom's bust of Queen Victoria. It's not subtle. You let it stay. In a storm like this, morale is more valuable than reverence. The hours drag. You count the rivets in the ceiling. You count how many times the rain hits the glass in one breath. You imagine letters home, soaked in nostalgia. Dearest sister, today I learned what infinity sounds like. Historians still debate whether these long stretches of inaction weakened the discipline of Yangtze patrols or fostered a unique kind of camaraderie. From where you sit, damp tea deprived, sleep hollowed, you lean toward the latter. At dawn, The rain thins into mist. The crew emerges like damp ghosts, blinking into pale light. The river finally speaks again, not with rage, but with its usual slosh and sigh. The quartermaster taps the barometer once more. She's fallen, then risen. We'll be on our way. You write in your journal, monsoon past. The world returns. Queen V now has eyebrows too. You lean over the rail watching the first sunbeam glance off the water's churn. The Yangtze gives back nothing it takes, but it sometimes lets you float a little longer. The river is calm again, almost as if it never raged at all. You drift past Wuhu now, a sleepy port with sleepy men unloading sleepy crates. The paddle wheel turns slow and steady, its rhythm matching the lazy swat of a mosquito against your collarbone. You're heading west, deeper inland, toward the unknown edges of treaty enforcement. And today, you're the face of the empire. Your orders investigate rumors of unauthorized fortifications along the riverbank. Intelligence is, as always, vague. It might be a bandit gang, might be a renegade warlord, might be just villagers shoring up flood defenses, or, as one salty gunner puts it, might be absolutely nothing with a whole lot of attitude. A mainstream fact. As British patrols pushed deeper inland during the late 1850s, tensions flared between imperial forces and local landowners, many of whom viewed European vessels as both alien and intrusive. Historians still argue whether these encounters were provocations or simply misunderstandings amplified by steam whistles and poorly translated manifestos. You step off the ship in full uniform again. A local farmer points you up a narrow mud path, eyes wary. No walls, he says in halting English. Only rice and ghosts. You're not sure which worries you more. A mile inland you see it a structure, not quite a fort, not quite a shrine. Mud bricks, reinforced with old wooden beams, and something that looks suspiciously like a cannon poking out from behind a mulberry tree. A boy of maybe 12 scampers off into the brush. No resistance, no guards, just stillness and the sound of your own boots in wet grass. You circle the structure, knock once on the frame. It creaks. Then a shout followed by the unmistakable clatter of someone running through bamboo. You draw your sidearm instinctively, then lower it. This isn't war. This is theater. Inside the building you find scrolls, a crate of dried mushrooms, and a hand-painted sign reading, Community Watch, River Guardians. Ah, so not a rebellion, just a rural neighborhood watch, armed with repurposed fireworks and a lot of imagination. A quirky tidbit in 1859, a group of British sailors reported being ambushed by what they swore was a dragon cult armed with glowing paper lanterns and oversized bamboo spears. Upon inspection, it turned out to be a village preparing for Lantern Festival. The sailors, embarrassed, gifted them a tin of biscuits. Peace was restored. You returned to the ship with a brief report. Fortification, false alarm. recommend a barrel of rice wine as goodwill gesture. The captain reads it and smirks. "Do we have any rice wine?" he asks. The cook yells from below deck, "Only vinegar." Close enough. Back on deck you watch the villagers reappear. One waves a red cloth flag, or farewell, it's hard to say. You wave back. Later, as the sun dips low, the crew gathers for supper. Someone strums a makeshift lute, plucking a folk tune about a ghost bride and a drowned taxman. It makes no sense, but it rhymes in 3 languages. Historians still debate whether these riverine incidents helped solidify British influence or sowed seeds of deeper resistance. Some records point to peaceful coexistence, others to smoldering anger. You suspect both are true, depending on the hour and the interpreter. Before sleep, you add to your journal. Found no rebellion, just a shed with ambition. Ghosts unconfirmed. You lie back in your cot, the hum of the river in your ears once more. The walls no longer leak. The gunboat sways gently. And far in the distance, someone lights a sky lantern, its orange glow bobbing like a firefly too stubborn to rest. The river has grown wide again, not just in miles, but in meaning. You've now spent weeks tracing its bends, patrolling its contested banks, sipping its muddy tea, and arguing over its floating politics. The caduceus hums beneath your feet like a weary dog that knows the way home. But home, of course, is far from here. What lies ahead is Nanjing. What's behind is a long, slow list of towns, temples, customs posts, and glances, both hostile and resigned. The patrol nears its end. One final sweep, one final set of smiles, rifles, inked stamps, and handshake reports before someone else takes your cot and your coat and your view of the world. Nanjing rises slowly through the morning haze. Towering walls first, then rooftops, then flags. British-French Qing, a gray mishmash of authority. From the deck, it looks peaceful. From the logs, it's a ledger of mistrust. And yet the city has always had a strange rhythm. You step off at the pier, boots echoing against stone as a sleepy customs officer nods without checking papers. A mainstream fact. Nanjing was the site of the 1858 treaty that ended the first phase of the Second Opium War, an agreement which opened more ports, legalized opium, and seeded decades of resentment. Historians still debate whether the treaties genuinely stabilized the region or merely disguised new tensions in imperial silk. Today's mission is symbolic. You're here to show the flag, as they say, to remind Nanjing that Britannia hasn't forgotten the Yangtze. And you do it not with drums or sabers, but with a well-pressed coat, polished buttons, and a walk through the foreign concessions without flinching. Local shopkeepers pretend not to stare. One offers lychees. You accept, peeling them, slowly, sticky hands leaving ghost marks on your notebook. 2 children play with a spinning top, stopping only to point at your boots, giggle, and vanish. At the governor's yamen, a clerk greets you in practiced English. The commissioner regrets. He is ill, deeply, entirely, possibly contagious. You nod. You expected as much. You leave your calling card anyway, pressed into red lacquer like a seal on a treaty no one will read. Outside, you notice a new plaque on the wall. In friendship, there is profit. In silence, peace. It's written in 4 languages, none of which quite agree on the tone. A merchant next to it is selling silk fans, with Churchill's face painted in ink. You buy one. Why not? You lunch aboard the Caduceus, surrounded by damp laundry, tired jokes, and a breeze that smells of garlic and coal smoke. The river glints beside you, always moving, always pretending to forget. You stare into it, and it stares right back. A quirky tidbit one officer once swore he saw a mermaid in this stretch of water. Turned out to be a drowned lion dance costume caught on a log. Still, the name stuck. That bay is now called Mermaid's Hollow, on at least 3 old naval charts. The crew prepares to head back downstream. You watch them fold, canvas check coal stores, re-oil the revolvers. They didn't fire once. No gunfights, no daring rescues. Just observation, implication, and an excellent tan. You write your final log entry, Yangtze Patrol concluded. Flags raised. Ghosts respected. Tea superior. And then you finally allow yourself to rest. The boots are off. The uniforms draped across a wooden peg. The Caduceus hums gently beneath your back like a lullaby, stitched from engine grease and iron dreams. Outside your porthole, the river is ink black, the moon a smudge on clouded parchment. You hear water lapping softly like the planet itself, exhaling. A crewman coughs once, then silence. You lie still, your breath matching the river's rhythm. The patrol is done. No more tea negotiations, no more ghost forts, no more mistaken dragon cults, or rain that falls sideways. Just you. Just the current. Just the soft creak of a hull that's grown to know your weight. Your eyelids grow heavy. The sounds blur coal, shifting ropes, creaking, footsteps soft as memory. Somewhere, far upstream, a fisherman lights a floating lantern and sends it out. Maybe it's a wish. Maybe a farewell. You imagine it bobbing past the Caduceus, its glow casting ripples on the hull. You don't sit up. You don't wave. You just let the image drift by like the last page of a long, quiet book. So, let the river carry you now. Let its silt-heavy voice whisper across the decades. Let your breath deepen, your limbs, soften your thoughts, slide like driftwood. Because tonight, you are not an officer. You are not a diplomat. You are just a soul, floating gently in twilight, listening to a story that the Yangtze began telling long before you arrived, and will keep telling long after you sleep.